Oh, it works. I don't usually need a microphone, but I've been told because we're recording it, I'm going to use one. So, well, hello. I am so excited by this event today, and it's such fantastic to see so many people. Some I know, and actually a lot of you I don't know. So it's brilliant to see so many new faces here today. So for those that don't know me, I'm Ali Morris. I'm part of Merched Cymru. I also have an interest in campaigning against pornography and prostitution. I run my own consultancy business, and now I focus mainly on that. Some of you may also know that I work in Japan with young girls in prostitution and pornography as well. So I'm really, really excited to hear Joe and Rob today. So Merched Cymru is really thrilled to be able to run this event today. So for those that don't know who Merched Cymru is, we're a grassroots group of women from across Wales who are working to protect... I won't stand in front of that. To protect and strengthen the sex-based rights of women and girls. Our members and followers include women from different age groups, as you can see today, ethnic backgrounds, sexual orientation, women of faith, and those who have none. We are not aligned to any particular political party, and we do welcome a range of political perspectives. So please take a look at our leaflets on the small table over there. And if you want, you can sign up to our newsletter so you can hear about things that we are doing. And if you want to become a member, you can also please put your name down and somebody will get in touch with you for that. On January the 20th, we have a special member-only online event where we will be hearing from members of the different political parties here in Wales about how they will be supporting women and girls' rights at the next Senedd election. So if you'd like to be a part of that, then please sign up before you leave today. So before introducing our panel, I'll explain the format of the event today. So for those who have prepaid for Joe and Rob's book, they can be collected from the back on top of the piano. There are also some for sale. So if you haven't already picked one up, and you can buy one after listening, obviously, to the conversation. So Kerry here will organise that after the conversation. So we will hear Joe and Rob in conversation with Tams until about 3 o'clock. Then we're going to open up the discussion to the floor for about half an hour. So there are some paper on the table over there and some pens. So if you want to scribble down some questions or if you hear anything that they talk about during the conversation, please grab some paper before we start. Oh, sorry. We will then have the last half hour of the event where Joe and Rob will be pleased to sign any books and have some photos and obviously have a conversation with them. So doesn't that sound a brilliant way to spend a Saturday afternoon in January? So first I'd like to introduce Dr Tamasine Preece. So there's Tamasine on the end. She is curriculum lead for health and wellbeing at a secondary school in South Wales. She's a freelance consultant and researcher of children and young people's contexts, specifically focused on relationships and sex education, pornography and exploitation, social media, self-harm and suicide and risk-taking behaviours. She is co-founder of Humanize, a former member of the expert panel for the charity Internet Matters, and consults regularly for governments, charities and agencies. Tamasine is here today in her own capacity as an individual. Next we have Jo Bartosch. Jo is a journalist and assistant editor at The Critic. She is one of the UK's foremost voices on safeguarding and women's rights, writing for Spiked, Unheard, The Telegraph, and other national publications. She is a fierce campaigner against pornography and the sex trade. And next we have Robert Jessel. He's a writer and campaigner with a particular focus on child exploitation, competing rights claims, freedom of speech, and the impact of new technology on humanity. He is a staunch male ally in campaigning against pornography. So please let's give them a wondrous Welsh welcome.
now, pal. I'm going to see how I go without the microphone, because I am a bit of a foghorn, because I am a teacher. Those at the back, are you able to hear me? Yeah. Great stuff. So if we can, I'll carry on without the microphone, and also because I know it will just be with me, Feedback Central, and so on and so on. So welcome, Joe and Rob. Joe, we've met in person before. Rob, we haven't, but I've obviously been following your work, just as so many people in the room have today, and it's just beyond excited to meet you today. Thank you so much. The book is called Pornocracy. I have read it. I read it over Christmas. Joe and I were just chatting just a little bit before as people were coming in. And Joe asked me what I thought of it, which is a really difficult question to be asked by the person who just wrote it. But when you're sitting next to him. I absolutely loved it, I have to say. I was quite honest with Joe in that I found it quite triggering in a literal sense, not in the way that sometimes Year 11 pupils use PE, but triggering in that to see in black and white what we know, whether you are a teacher, a social worker, local government, whether you are a parent, grandparent, and so on, to see written down, even if you don't quite know what it is that we are facing, but you have an inkling that something is up and it's not okay, to see it written so starkly. I was very honest with Joe. I read it a chapter at a time and then went back to the latest Philippa Gregory. But anyway, I absolutely loved it. It is witty, it's dry, and just a really extraordinary book. But there will be people in the room today who are here, obviously, because I said they know something's up. There'll be people who've read it already. There'll be people who are collecting their book for the first time today, along with their ticket. But I wondered, just to kind of get everyone on the same page before we get started today, what is a pornocracy? What does it mean to live in a pornocracy? You write about pornocrats, big porn. Would you mind just giving us all a sense, just to begin, with what do you mean by that, and what is pornocracy in your book?
Sure. So we define it as a system of control, and a system of control that changes how we think, how we relate to one another, and even ultimately our laws. And I think it can be seen as part of the fourth industrial revolution, if you like. So that's the idea that the way to make money now is to mine what it is to be human. So to extract, to use human behavior to extract data points to make money. And that's what pornography does. I mean, that's what all social media does. And we're starting to understand that, for example, social media is addictive and that you get a dopamine hit each time you use it. So pornography is based on the same premise, but it's like that because you reinforce it with an orgasm. It is so much more powerful. So for the users, essentially, it hooks them in. They become addicts, or many of them do. And more widely than that, because it changes their thinking and the way that they relate to other people, it then goes on to change society and to change, I don't think we'd have had, for example, grok undressing people, or indeed women, had it not have been for a sort of an ambivalence about this. It's just sort of accepted as a normal part of human nature rather than as technology manipulating what it is to be human.
I think for me, key point about pornocracy is that it's about enslavement. I obviously come at this from a men's perspective, and I make no apologies for that. It's obvious to anyone who knows anything about pornography about the enslavement of those who are forced either directly by men or by circumstances to appear in porn. What's different these days is the scale of the enslavement of all who use it, who then pass on that pain and that degradation to others in their lives. It's the scale of it, it's how fast things mutate, and above all, it's about for the users of porn, it's about the illusion of control. If you go onto a pornographic website, you are presented with huge amounts of imagery. If you're a first-time porn user and there's no cookies on your browser that says what you're interested in, the porn site will suggest some things that you might like. And research from France that's looked at millions of these videos shows that some of the most violent and the most degrading porn is offered up to first-time users. So you have no choice as a user, but to plunge into the darkest part, and you very, very quickly lose control because of how the brain processes something that is experienced as a pleasurable, rewarding thing. So that makes, so as with any addiction, whether it's alcohol or hard drugs or any other behavior that can be addictive, the user very quickly spirals not just into more and more extreme content, but the denial that they have around that control very, very quickly goes. I don't know whether many people in this audience knows a porn user or knows somebody who's open about how they use porn, but let me disabuse you of the idea that men are quickly going to a dark room and spending 5 minutes and doing their business and then going. It is very, very common now for men to be spending not minutes but hours trying to find the perfect video. The point here is not to have an orgasm and to get it out the way. It is to be in a state of arousal. This is what drives the parts of the brain's reward system. It wants more and more and more. It wants to keep on that plane. It doesn't want to spike and finish. And it's this, what is going on in men's brains, and what Joe has alluded to about the reinforcing the behavior through an orgasm and all the neurotransmitters that come with it, that makes this the most perfect example of a new digital created sickness. It's, and as Joe says, it is like social media addiction on steroids. So that's how I would describe it.
I'd really like to go into the weeds a little bit more in just a moment, if that's okay. Before doing so, though, can I just ask, what is it that kind of got you here? I mean, I'm following your work for many years now. I believe you've been in this area, related areas, safeguarding, for around about 10 years. Is that correct? Maybe even longer. But what was the moment right now? I mean, what do you think it is about late 2025? See, I understand you were working on it all of last year. But what is it about this moment now which you felt that as journalists it was time that, as writers, that it was time that Pornocracy had to be written now? What happened there?
So it was my sort of, I put together the proposal, and it was really because nobody else had, not for a long time. So it's obviously Gail Dines' fabulous book, but it's now over a decade old, and of the books that have come along since.
Sorry, Joe, is that Pornland?
Sorry, yes. And of the books that have come along since, so for example, Fiona Vera Gray did Women on Porn, which is very good, and then there's recently been one by Laura Bates, and that, you know, they're good books, but none of them take a firm feminist moral stance to just say this is wrong, this is sort of, you know, this is industrial scale sexual exploitation. They're all very, very keen to avoid judgment, and I just thought, actually, do you know what, I think this is something that we can be very clear on, and we ought to be very clear on it. And the reason I wanted to co-write it was A, because I knew the subject matter would be very dark. B, I thought writing it with a man, I mean, you know, we've had sort of over 50 years of feminists trying to fight porn and nobody's bloody listened. So in a way, because I'm absolutely steeped in this stuff, I thought writing it with a man who didn't know that much about feminist theory would give me a sort of a fresh perspective. And indeed, the stuff that Rob's mentioned about addiction, I was very, very sceptical and sneery about that, because to me it was sort of an excuse, a way that men getting out of, a way that men get out of responsibility. But actually, when I sort of read his arguments and we started to research, I realised it was integral to the book. So I think sort of the tying together, not just of the feminist theory, but also of the wider issues, I think was what made it seem important and new. Did you want to?
Not particularly. As Joe says, I'm not steeped in feminist theory. I had not really given any thought to porn at all. I was at a point in my career where I had the space to be able to devote some time to it, and I thought it was a project that was just as worthy as any other, and it would be an interesting thing to learn about. It took me about 5 days, I think, for me to change my mind completely and to decide that this was quite possibly the biggest social problem affecting the society in which I live, and by that I don't just mean the UK. I mean any country with broadband access. That certainly that has come to my attention in my lifetime. The dangers and the abuse and the degradation to women. I learnt about things that instinctively I did know anyway, and I think anyone with an inquiring mind would know. But it was what I learnt about men that really shocked me about us, and about those who do and have used porn. That was the first thing that I took a look at, and that just sent me down the rabbit hole.
Picking up on something each of you have said then, Joe, how did Rob convince you about addiction theory? And Rob, how did Joe convince you to write the book? Sorry. Joe. Just ask the question again. Joe, how did Rob convince you regarding addiction theory? And then Rob, how did Joe convince you to write the book?
I suppose for me, because taking away the just looking at it as in a sort of purely objective way, without ideology, without theory, it is just so clear that it is a behaviour that is addictive, that it reinforces reward pathways just in the same way as drugs do. It is absolutely indisputable if you look at just the raw facts of it. It made me uncomfortable to acknowledge it, and I really didn't want to. And then I had to say, damn it, he's right.
Don't hear that very often, I must admit. Can I slightly change the question? I didn't need a lot of convincing to write the book, because I had admired Joe's journalism ever since I came across it when I started involving myself in the gender wars about 2017. What Joe made me do. My day job is writing about tech, really about the sort of business end of tech, and I've always been very sceptical of it, and it's always worried me how fast things are going, how fast it's changing us and our society beyond our capability of actually sort of catching up with it in an evolutionary way. But my day job is essentially, here are some facts. Can you present these facts in some nice words, about 800 words long? And I thought, well, that's just doing a book is just doing that, but a lot longer. And Joe said, facts are great, but there's got to be some theory. There's got to be some thought behind it. And it took me quite a long time to understand what Joe meant, and I wouldn't say immersed myself in feminist theory, but I read more than I ever thought that I would. And towards the end of the writing, and indeed sort of a lot of the editing and some of the speaking we did last year, I started to understand what Joe meant by theory, which is drilling down to what is the key issues behind this. Joe mentioned it earlier about, pornography has always been about the commodification of women's bodies, but now it's about our souls. It's about what we like. It's about what we feel, which is a very, very frightening thing. For me, Joe forcing me to look at theory led me sort of deeper and deeper and deeper into the issue until I came to the conclusion that what porn is it's a war on love, and it's a business war too. You want to make money at the expense of people being not just being in love and having expressing sexuals to love, but the ability even to feel it too, which is why that's the sort of fundamental to all of this, and I will try and explain this as we go on.
Can I stay with you, please, Bob?
Sure.
Okay, so there'll be people in the room now. I hope I would be one of them who thinks I reject porn. So porn is not part of my life. The best of my knowledge, the people I love, the people who are important to me, they don't use pornography. I obviously work to combat pornography in every opportunity. pornography doesn't have any part of my life. And I'm sure there'll be people in the room who, whether they think, oh, I don't participate in pornography through its engagement or any other way, or they'll be thinking I actively take steps to fight pornography. Male and female, so could I ask you to talk about men and boys to begin with, and then Joe, please could you talk about women and girls? But what would you say to like any men in the room now who say that pornography is not part of my life in any way? So how would you explain how all men and all boys are impacted by pornocracy, living in a pornocracy, as you argue so well that we do? What would you say? If that's not too big a...
Gosh, I mean, that is a very, very big question. Let's say that you as a man reject pornography and you've never viewed it. I've yet to meet this man, but let's say he exists. Does he keep society, does he keep friendships only with people who use porn? Does he speak out whenever he sees women being talked about in the pub using porn terms, using degrading terms? It would be a very, very lonely life for a man who is constantly on the lookout to inquire of his friends and his co-workers whether they are free of porn. He would have to have no children too. He could tell his children and be as good a father as he wanted to not only to counsel them that they should not watch porn, but to explain why. How is he then going to stop that child in the playground from having a phone thrust in their face? Look at this. This is really grim. This is really disgusting. Whether it's porn or whether, as we know, it's some terrible ISIS violence videos. Those are just a few thoughts to just get across the impossibility of being immune from porn. I haven't even spoke about if the man has daughters too, which is I think a point that Joe might actually want to pick up rather than me.
Thank you, Rob. So to repeat the question, how are all women and all girls impacted by pornography, even if they do not believe they are engaging in any pornographic content?
I mean, quite simply because the majority of certainly the male population is looking at it. So, for example, if you are a victim of a sexual assault, the chances are it will now be recorded. And the chances are that the abuser will have taken his cues from things that he has seen in porn. Now, when you report it to the copper, the chances are the police officer will be one of the 10 million monthly users of pornography who will have possibly not take you seriously because they will have taken their sexual cues from the porn that they're watching. Then obviously when it gets to court, the judges, the lawyers, everybody, it is so mainstream and it is so enmeshed in our culture. It is inescapable. And I would even go so far as to say things like surrogacy, the idea that women's bodies can be sort of chopped up and used as parts and viewed as parts. I think that is downstream of sort of pornocratic thinking. I also believe that gender self-identification is straight out of pornography. So were it not the case that these men had essentially binged on porn to the point where they have to sort of act it out, where they have to sort of embody the pornography that they're viewing, if that wasn't the case, if it wasn't the case that that they view women as a sort of two-dimensional sexual stereotype that they have absorbed from pornography, essentially the idea of being a woman is being submissive to these men, then we wouldn't have self-ID laws. Then that wouldn't have become normal. And I mean, it is literally the sort of boundary-pushing behaviour that is normalised through pornography. So yes, it impacts everything from how we view ourselves. I mean, even down to sort of, the decisions we make about what clothing we wear. If you look at sort of the huge rise in cosmetic procedures, I mean, obviously that's also a wider problem with social media, but still, it is such a powerful force. If it can sort of force women to have surgery on their labia, I mean, it can force women to cut into their own flesh. It pulls relationships apart. If you look at the numbers of young people in particular who are entering into relationships, it's dropping year on year. And that is absolutely because they are becoming unable to relate to one another, or I believe it's absolutely because they're becoming unable to relate to one another because of the pornography that they're watching. I would also go so far as to say even the birth rate, the decline in the birth rate is probably downstream of the use of pornography. And obviously there are there's a lot of money to be made, not just in the industry itself, but also in sex tech, in, for example, sort of porn robots. And those sorts of things. So, this sort of dehumanizing drive, the commodification of sex, the hijacking of sexuality, and the pulling of the sexes apart impacts everybody. And sadly, no one is spared.
Sorry, Rob, did you want to... thank you, Joe. Did you want to add something?
Yes, I just going back to the subject of men, and sort of when you segue from women to men, it's quite hard to avoid bathos, really, because the impact on women and men is so large. But it just reminded me this morning there was an article in the Spectator from a female A-level student, and she was talking about grok and the undressing capability, which can hear from the audience. We all know what it is, and because I'm a subscriber to the Spectator, I've had the privilege to go and look at the comments, and every single one seemed to be from a man. And it was, well, if you're stupid enough to put your photo online, then you basically got it coming. And it was all the sort of stuff that I'm sure everybody's very, very well familiar with. Again, with apologies for this appearing to be so minor, but I would say the damage to men of the pornocracy is ignorance. If you are not able to know what is going on, why it's not a good thing that women that women's consent matters at all. We are in 2025. Six? No, yes, quite. If you are either ignorant of what pornography is, in denial of the harms that it does, then you are of no use to this world, because this world is made up of men and women. We all have to coexist. We all have to sort of know a little bit about what affects the other sex and sort of how we affect them. If you can't even get into the most basic sense of the other sex's personhood and of their experience of the world, you are a useless person. You are taking up room. And again, next to what Joe said, this is pretty minor stuff, but also at the same time quite fundamental to my sex's existence, I would say.
And I hate myself for asking this question, but please no, I don't believe it. But just because it will be, and it may actually be a really useful tool, because when people do start having conversations with people, whether it's in passing or, but the subject of grok, obviously, it's been massive in the week. I listened to a podcast this week of one of the former partners of Elon Musk, who is now taking action against Musk for having been bikinified and then bent over and all manner of things done to them on X by ex-users, and got absolutely nowhere in terms of having it all removed. There will be people who say, I am not one of them, surely it doesn't matter if it's not actually happening to the real body. AI porn, how can that possibly matter? You're not hurting the actual person. And the same, the chapter that was the hardest read for me, I did still read it in one day because it was a chapter a day, but it was very much broken up. The one on sex robots and sex robots of children. Surely, and actually you explain this argument very well, but for those people who haven't yet read your book, what would you say to people who say, oh, but it's just AI, it's not real, it's a robot of a child, how can that, surely, I don't believe this, surely that's better than someone doing it to another human being, right? Right? No.
That's a very interesting question, Mrs. Mephistopheles. Joe, this...
Yeah, all right, so...
You've never been asked that before, have you?
So I think the reason that pornography is so dangerous is that, in effect, it's a permission-giving medium. So if you see something, if you have a dark desire and you see it acted out, it normalizes it, it makes it seem okay. Which is, why you end up, when you look at the sort of the baseline of male criminality, that's particularly concerning. So we know, for example, that a third of men admit I think it drops to 1 in 10, or it drops if you use the word rape. But basically, if you ask ordinary men, and this has been replicated in many surveys, and it's very disturbing, would they force sex on a woman if there were no consequences? A third of them would. So when you look at that sort of low base rate of, that very high base rate of sort of male criminality, or the propensity to commit sexual assault or rape against women, and then you have this sort of permission-giving medium, that's dangerous in its own right. When you then start to sort of draw them into vortices of more and more extreme things to sort of feed their addiction, that's what you end up with. That's when you end up with, and it's something we didn't actually cover that much in the book, but we really should have, with sort of really strange niche perversions that become sort of normalised, and then sort of subcultures emerge around them, so like furries and all the rest of it. These are all sort of downstream of that. And obviously AI porn, you can do whatever you want, and indeed you can do whatever you want to somebody who doesn't exist. But the point is that the purpose is, it's not the individual sort of, it's not the character. It's not, for example, it's not the sex robot who's being hurt. It's the fact that these things get tried out on the sex robot before they're tried out on the child. I mean, for example, when it comes to porn bots of children, they found that every time there's an arrest, if they look at their hard drive, they always have reams of child sexual abuse material as well. It's a total overlap, of course we do. And that's, I think, part of the problem. It sort of normalises the extreme. It gives permission for things that really we ought to feel shame about, that ought not to be permitted. And it sort of locks people into this really solipsistic model of sexuality that means they are essentially unable to relate to other people. So yes, I think it's incredibly dangerous, in fact, possibly even more dangerous, because there are no limits.
I would say, if to your question about why does it matter if it's not real, if it's invented by a computer, why then are deepfakes or AI images, why are they used as punishment? Why do we have even the concept of revenge porn? Everybody knows the purpose of it. It is to degrade, and where it is to get a sexual thrill, it is to get a sexual thrill through the actions of power, the actual ability to undress someone. There's an anecdote in the book about a mother who came across some deepfake pornography of her own daughter, and I think she said, if I didn't know that she has a particular birthmark down there, I would have thought it was her. That's her own mother. If something like this goes around a school, I mean, we all know what school was like. We all know how horrible. Well, I know how horrible boys can be, and I've heard a lot about how girls are a lot worse. You can yeah, you can. I always say that there is nothing to stop somebody from targeting an unpopular person in their school or a rival, say, creating a deep fake in the morning, spreading it around at break, and by lunchtime it'll be all round the school. And by home time, that girl, and it will be a girl, will be in tears and will be considering suicide. So yeah, this is not a victimless crime. Yes, and the last thing I'll say is that we're all deeply embedded, and we've all closely watched and been involved with the struggle against trans rights activists, I beg your pardon, trans activists, where the punishment is the process itself of sort of clearing your name or dealing with the police. With porn, it's men more generally, and the punishment is, or the outcome is, to get women out of a certain sphere, whether it's at school, get out of our social group, on social media. This is a space for men. We don't want you feminizing us. We don't want your opinions. If it's in the workplace, if it's in industry, my own industry, tech, it's about saying, men made this, and men will continue to decide what the rules are.
To add to that, I totally agree that it's effectively we're going to have a choice very soon of a digital burqa or, you know, it's going to be very hard to stay in public life, I think, for women unless something changes. And I think we're already seeing it used against female politicians and indeed against campaigners. So Collective Shout, a fabulous feminist organisation in Australia, they campaigned to have some rape games removed from a platform called Steam, which incidentally has over, I think it had about 400 of them. So they managed to get these games taken down, and in response, the users made deepfake porn of them, like instantly. And you know, you've got to have a pretty thick skin to be able to deal with that. So yeah, I think it's going to make it much harder for women to maintain any sort of presence in public life or indeed online life.
Can I just add one thing, and I apologise in advance. One of the problems I've encountered with this and trying to get the message across is when we're talking about porn, it mutates so fast that it's easy for us to have an image in our mind and it stays like that. When Joe's talking about the abuse of the wonderful campaigners at Collective Shout and they made deep fake porn, we're not talking about putting their picture on a naked body. We're talking about hyper-realistic, high-definition, moving camera. It's just like a video.
What? Oh, actually, I was thinking, did you see, I don't know how many of you know Helen Staniland?
Her dog, yeah.
With the trans activist sort of posted a picture of her dog having its head cut off. It's that sort of thing at scale.
And I apologise if everybody knew that. I just thought it was quite important to state that you know, you can do anything.
There was about 18 months ago, I remember deepfakes being made of adult celebrities made into children. So AI of them as children. And in fact, something we haven't touched on today, and I do think it's really, really important. If you haven't listened to it, there's a very good WRN interview with Joe and Rob, which covers some of the... Actually, it's gone from quite a different angle to the way we're going today, so it is a really good complementary listen, I think. But just to explain to our audience today, the relationship between the watching of what would be considered to be quite mainstream porn, if there is such a thing anymore, and the pipeline then to the abuse of children. Would you mind just summarising that for us? Because I realise it's something we haven't actually covered today.
I can look at that from the brain perspective. The thing about pornography is that it's something that humans are not evolved to cope with. We all have a sex drive, and men are attracted to sex. You know, we are mammals, the same as so many other creatures on this world, and we have a strong sex drive. But like many things that we evolved with, sex was sort of feast or famine. What pornography does, by simulating sex and replacing that drive, or at least satisfying it in some sense, there is so much of it, and it's available at any time. It's accessible, it's affordable, and it's anonymous too. Is we have this huge ocean of stimulation available to us, and our brains are not wired for that. In the book, we talk about the Nobel Prize-winning biologist Nicholas Tinbergen, and he talks about a super stimulus. It's something that doesn't exist in nature. You have researchers going to a bird's nest and putting more brightly painted eggs in there, and the bird will pay more attention to that. You also have the fact that men's sex drive thrives on variety too. If you put a rat in a box with a female rat, he will mate with it until he's shagged out. If you take the female out and put a new one in, suddenly he gets a whole new lease of life. And it's exactly the same with porn. Studies have been shown, before ethics committees got involved, that if you put a man and have him watch the same pornographic video, his arousal will droop with each repeated watch. If you do a new one, goes back up. So that's what porn gives.
You call it the Coolidge effect, don't you?
Well, we don't call it that because it's been around for such a long time. The idea that the men crave the variety, and this is always offered to them. And if you're always looking for something new, and if something that's more vanilla and more tame isn't really doing the job, the part of your brain that deals with rewards, that makes you want things and makes you like things, is inevitably going to look for something that's just a bit new that you haven't seen before. This process is very, very well known by Silicon Valley, or rather, I should say, the San Fernando Valley. They have more money than God. Why shouldn't they use exactly the same tricks that TikTok and YouTube and Instagram and so forth do to keep you on the page? Which is, as we've seen with social media, it's the stuff that rage baits you, that gets you to click and engage and get angry. With porn, it's more the stuff that makes you feel slightly afraid and also aroused at the same time. Where can you go from women being abused? Well, teenagers being abused. When that pales, where do you go? For me, the only surprise is that more men are not watching this content. I mean, we have no way of knowing, and it frightens me very much, because the last thing I'll say, I have a Google alert set up on my email account, and it's set to tell me in real time any news story that comes up with the word pornography in it, and I get about 20 of those a day. I would say 18 of those are, Texas man arrested on child porn. It is, yes, I mean, it really, really terrifies me.
Two teachers in Swansea in recent months, actually.
Yeah.
With sexually limited.
And may I say, none of what I say should be taken as an excuse or lessening the crime. But I think it's really important that we understand. Oh, Joe, you talked to Michael Sheath, didn't you?
Yeah. So Michael Sheath is an expert in sex offender management. And he's been working with sex offenders for sort of many years, and he noticed around about around about 2010, a new group emerging of sex offenders, child sex offenders. And he said previously there'd been this sort of strange thing where they were kind of almost proud of being paedophiles, and they would talk about. They would talk about it as sort of in terms of liberating child sexuality. So the whole kind of funny, queer theory, and indeed the pie, and exactly the whole sort of pie strategy. And then around about 15 or so years ago, he started to come across men who were deeply ashamed of looking up the images that they'd been looking up, and this sort of new group, this entirely new group of sex offenders. See, frankly, if we were to arrest every single one, our prisons would be overflowing. So 8 out of 10 of them don't get a custodial sentence. And I think that has been acknowledged by the police, by Simon Bailey. He just said, so he was the National Chief Police Safeguarding Lead for many years. So I don't think he is anymore. And he basically said, we don't have the space. We can't prosecute everyone. We can't arrest them all. We're going to have to look at different ways of dealing at this, because essentially it has become so common. So I think to sort of pretend there was no connection there is wishful thinking. Of course there is. And of course at the other end, the other end of the scale is children who are traumatised by looking at pornography, and then find themselves. So there was one young woman who ended up in the sex industry who I spoke with, and she started looking at pornography before she was even a teenager. When she was very, very young, she was looking for a video of Taylor Swift, and she came across this stuff. She became addicted to it because she was sort of looking to try and understand, to try and wrap her head around sort of adult sexuality, to try and get a handle of it. And the message she took from it was that sex should hurt, that it shouldn't be enjoyable. And so it was quite logical for her, as I think it is indeed possibly even for a majority of young women now, just to think, well, if I'm not going to enjoy it, if it's not about mutuality, if it's not about a relationship, if it's not about love, then I might as well charge for it. And that seemed like an entirely logical and indeed feminist thing for her to do. So I think that's the other end of how pornography effectively leads to the industrial scale abuse of children.
That takes us really nicely, actually, onto Bonnie Blue and Lily Phillips, who is someone I think, I'm pretty sure everyone in this room will have had a conversation about how to try and understand Bonnie Blue and Lily Phillips. I have my own theories, but how would you, particularly Joe, within a feminist context, how do you understand a phenomenon such as Bonnie Blue or Lily Phillips? Do you mind if I start with you?
No, not at all. I think, to be honest, depressingly inevitable. Given what I've just sort of described, I can see their trajectory. So both of them say that they saw pornography first when they were 11. And both of them have claimed, although I've since heard a contradictory interview with Lily Phillips, so I'm not entirely sure, but both of them have claimed that their family members were involved and that, in the business that they've set up. I think what makes it so complicated from a sort of traditional feminist point of view is that there's no longer an external pimp. I mean, the pimp is the entirety of society. It's in their heads. So it's not like there's sort of, some seedy bastard on a street corner. It's internalized and reinforced by everything they see around them. So it's really uncomfortable to look at these women because you can't put them in sort of entirely victim or entirely perpetrator. They are both. They've both done very well out of the pornocracy and they've both done very badly out of the pornocracy. But ultimately what we should be talking about are the sites themselves. So, the owners of OnlyFans who take their 20% cut, or indeed the men who use these women. So what they are doing is grotesque, it is harmful, it is unforgivable, in my opinion, but also, obviously, they're victims because that's what they've grown up seeing as normal. And indeed, they will live with the permanent psychological and potentially permanent physical damage as well to what's been done to them. So I would suggest that it's perhaps not a choice that they've made. I'd say it's a decision they've made. And if we had a different society where they were offered different decisions, then it would be far easier to either condemn or commend them.
Yeah, I would say that Bonnie Blue, Lily Phillips, they're sort of the acceptable face of OnlyFans from the perspective of the people who own OnlyFans. They are delighted that the media are talking about Bonnie Blue and not...
They kicked her off, didn't they?
Sorry?
They kicked her off.
Well, yeah. Whoops. Oh. Yes, I mean, they would much rather that we were talking about them than about the average user or average performer. I think who earns something like $140 a month, no, dollars a month. One thing I would disagree with slightly with Joe, the point about being the own internal pimp, is very strong, and I would say, but that doesn't mean that the pimps don't exist. They are just more hidden. Some people, I'm sure, will know about the phenomenon of the OnlyFans manager who comes in and says, I'm an expert about marketing, I will make you a big star. It's the reimagining of the casting couch, except these men exert a phenomenal amount of control. The typical thing is to make a woman sign a contract where she signs away her imagery and rights to herself and to her own personhood. She signs away the revenue that she makes too, and is given a sort of monthly wage. And then she is told that unfortunately this wage has been Jesus Christ, calming, and is told that unfortunately your videos aren't performing as well as they could be because they're a bit dull. Could you not spice it up a bit? Could you not do a bit more extreme stuff? And that takes them, the performer, down to places where they don't want to go and where they quite often get horrifically injured too. So I would say I would love to see less focus on Bonnie Blue and Lily Phillips, and every article that we read, every documentary about them, it's it's like a Potemkin village to hide to hide the real nature of what's going on.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Final question. The good news is in Wales, all our research is different when it comes to child safeguarding, like all things. So quite often, when people do approach their MSs or their MPs and saying, please can you look at this safeguarding issue in Wales, quite often we hear that Wales is somehow different, that our research is different, our safeguarding is different. Maybe that sounds familiar to some members of the audience today. Is Wales a pornocracy?
Of course it is, because it's the whole point is that it's a global phenomenon, and I know there have been some particularly sort of toxic and influential figures like Ellie Reynolds, who's and various others who I know have been sort of promoting queer theory under the guise of education, and I am very sceptical of those who set themselves up as RSE educators as a general rule. Sorry, not you know what I mean. Sorry, but generally I think there's.
That's quite right too.
No, sorry. But I'm just going to shut up now, Rob.
Just to reiterate my point from that I made a few minutes ago. Any country that has broadband is a pornocracy. What I would say about the question of Wales is that people who live in Wales, or people who live in Glamorgan, or people who live in Cardiff, or people who live on Charles Street, they all have to. They all have the opportunity, if they have children or know people who have children, to involve themselves in this fight at the very bottom, where it is most important, in schools. I'm not saying we can completely defeat it by everybody going to their schools, but it will make a huge start if we can kick pornography advocates out of schools, where we know that they infest the curriculum, not because teachers want to say that porn is good, but because there's no, as you know, there's no statutory guidance about how we teach porn specifically. There's lots on RSHE and consent centres and so forth. How on earth are you going to put together a curriculum to teach something that some parents are not even sure that teachers should teach sex? How do you teach something which is so fast moving, which as a teacher you're not really supposed to have any contact with yourself, and which even talking about possibly includes the sexualization of the very people you're trying to prevent? At what age? When most kids are generally have seen pornography, extreme pornography, by the ages of 12 to 13. Are you going to talk about sort of the dangers of anal sex, and why anal sex is portrayed on screen is not really what you should be doing in real life to 11-year-olds, 10-year-olds, and yet some of the content that is being given to teachers as the gold standard that you can download from reputable websites like TESS, do say that porn is fun, it's a treat, not too much. You should. It's cake, yeah. Not a slice of cake never hurt anyone. It's important to pay for porn, because that way you're supporting the industry and not taking it. What parents can do is not just make a stand to try and remove this content. It is making a stand just to make ourselves visible, to say that this is really important. In fact, the most important thing in our children's education. Forget any other subjects which you can then pick up in later life if that's of interest. If you've seen a woman being strangled or spat upon, or any of this stuff at the age of 9 or 10, as Joe said, this is trauma, and not enough parents, and especially men. Obviously, I include in this, are taking a stand and standing up. And I think the first step that we can do is to be seen. First to be seen, and then to show, because we know about this, and the people teaching children cannot be expected to.